Have you ever listened to a person talk for less than a minute and known you weren't going to get along with that person? What did they say? New guy at work. First coffee break. He started complaining about his ex, who had full custody of the kids for some unknowable reason, and also how he'd like to slash her throat with a rusty knife. Nice to meet you too. Don't think I'll be taking breaks with you. New guy started at my job. We were outside smoking on first break. Keep in mind I have never met nor spoken to this dude in my life. He walks up, lights up his cigarette and says, "You know, I think my severe arachnophobia has transformed into an arachnophilia. I've been watching a lot of Spider Hunter while masturbating." He then began to describe his new waifu pillow he bought, her name and his plans to marry her. I was speechless. Edit. I work in a distribution warehouse for a clothing company. We were forklift drivers. He didn't last very long, but not because of things he said. He was constantly late for work, and twice a week he'd show up in Crocs, knowing damn well I've told him 100 times he needs closed-toe shoes. I'd have to send him home to change shoes. I told him just keep a pair of shoes in his car, so he has something to wear at work. Didn't work, and eventually I had to let him go for excessive tardiness and absenteeism. Asked me, "Do you mind if smoke?" Then proceeded to take out a meth pipe. This is hilarious, but yeah, nah, not pal material. New guy at work. Super fake by being overly excited and super overly comfortable with everyone in the first minute. He's all mammy this and papy that to everyone, and very overly touchy. We were almost all Hispanics there and everyone was uncomfortable. First phone call of the day, he hangs up cursing and taking it super personally that someone hung up on him. Daily occurrence in customer service. After about 6 months, I put in my 2 weeks notice, solely because I couldn't work next to or with him anymore. He would also get overly gossipy and personal. My boss rejected my notice and transferred him. He couldn't stand the guy either. No one could. I was listening to the Nexiv podcast, and the clip of the founder saying, he has 225 IQ. If I walked into a room and heard someone say that, I'd walk right back out. I used to brag about my IQ score. It was off of a free internet test. I was 14. I learned better. No, 14 is a good score for the IQ test. Keep telling everybody about it. There are different levels to being a psychic. I'm on the purple level, so I can talk to the dead, said a new employee at my previous job. Nope. Oh, are you talking about D&D? I love fantasy stuff. The quiet boy at school sat next to me and told me how hard he felt when he took a shit and how many times he ejaculated that way. I never sat next to him again. Are you from the UK and was the kid's name Chris? FFS Chris, we all know it's you. You need to learn to keep that sort of shit to yourself. My man's Chris out here, given sage advice on how to nut from your butt in a different way, and you'll attempt to shame him like this. I was in a job interview once, and the manager cut me off mid-sentence to jump to a weird conclusion. Him. What do you think the performance of this algorithm would be? Me. Oh, it'll be n times. Him. Oh, you think it's going to be n? You think it'll be n? That's ridiculous. There's no way it would just be n. Me. You gotta let me finish speaking. He then cut me off mid-sentence twice more during our conversation. We didn't get along. Dude was a total tool. They talk negatively about someone else in a very judgy way. There was this mom in my daughter's school who seemed to know everyone. She talked to me and she spoke so bad about these people. Then moments later I saw her interacting in a friendly way with those she was judging. My eyes rolled so much I could see my brain telling me not to get involved with her, and I was right, because by the time school year ends, her friends hated her and they were talking behind her back too. A girl that used to be my best friend is like this. It was the weirdest thing to see her bitch about all these people, then have Insta photos up a few days later with them. I didn't notice she did this until our friendship was on the line, so I asked other people if she did this and they said yes too. I met one of my new colleagues at a barbecue that was being hosted by our work. I, a man, drove with another co-worker, a woman and a friend of mine. so we arrived together. When I was alone for a moment, this guy, whom I've never spoken to before, comes up next to me and says, "Yo dude, you hitting that gestures to my friend?" I said, "No, and she also has a boyfriend." He very exaggeratedly says, "Damn. Yada yada." He got fired 2 years later for harassing an intern. Literally last night, was at a local pool comp and went to introduce myself to my second round opponent. We shake hands and his first words to me are, "Weak effing handshake bro," followed by, "I hope you like banter mate," then proceeded to talk shit about every aspect of my game. The worst part was he was actually good at pool, so it just seems like he was generally a cunt. Some of his other opponents got it a lot worse than I did as well. Highlight of the night was when the comp host basically yelled in his face, "Everyone in this room effing hates you," which received a round of applause. He didn't seem to understand why that was. Just banter bro. Edit. Ahaha, the comp is 90% regulars that are there every week. This was the guy's first time playing there. He knew no one, except for the couple of mates he brought. I can assure people calling me a liar that he was universally hated. He ended up losing the final, which received more of a response than the host yelling at him, but yeah lol. I don't even know why I'm responding to this. I guess I have never had this much attention on anything I have ever shared on the internet. Parent of one of my kids' friends at school said there was a mouse in their house and his wife wanted him to kill it, but he didn't want to kill any creatures. He wants to make friends with them instead, but wife insisted, so he threw his shoe at it and eventually managed to hit it, but it wasn't dead. So he threw his shoe at it another 4 times. It still wasn't dead, so he poured boiling water over it to kill it. It still didn't die, so he poured boiling water over it again. It still wasn't dead, so he decided to leave it alone in the hopes that it would peacefully pass away. The logic of being too squeamish to kill something, and instead decide to torture it to death slowly, in the most agonizingly painful way, absolutely blew my mind. She showed up to a little get together, and the person who invited her said that they would be taking bets on who could sit with her for more than 30 minutes, $10 per person. Winner kept the pot. I assumed they were just being rude and planned to tell her of her friend's plans as soon as she showed up. She walked in, looked at me and scoffed, and asked if the grey car outside belonged to me. I said yes. She told me that with the money that car cost I could have bought something nicer. Okay, well whatever. I went to get a drink and sat to watch the crowd gather around her. I already didn't like her, but she went on to tell everyone about how she could never date someone who had a crappy credit score or couldn't pay their vehicles off. After buying it, someone who wanted to quit the contest asked for a cigarette. She opened up her purse and showed everyone a fresh pack of smokes, and then told everyone why she doesn't smoke and why anyone who asks for a cigarette is either too broke to buy them or doesn't plan ahead of times. The guy asked her for one of her cigarettes. She said no and put them back in her purse. She talked about all the cars she bought. Basically her parents would co-sign for her and pay the car off to build her credit, and she would give them a few thousand to pay them back. She was nuts and wouldn't stop talking. I disliked her but was also fascinated with her. She was super weird. Update. So I have gotten a few questions about this girl and that night. Also, who is Gina? There was something like 15-20 people there and most entered the contest. I think the pot got up to $100-120. The winner was just some guy who I didn't know. He spent the money getting everyone McDonald's and beer, so he was pretty cool. She was about 22-23. She had just finished getting her high school diploma because she had dropped out to make money, according to her. I think she sold some milkshake things and fitness plans with some MLM. For those wondering what happened to her, I'm not 100% what happened to her. She wasn't my friend, but she did show up to a few parties I was at, and she seemed calmer. She used to bring her own bottle of liquor and wouldn't share, which was kind of funny, because on one occasion, they caught her filling her bottle with a bottle of Jack that someone had brought and left on the kitchen counter, but she swore that all she drank was Hennessy and Fireball. Years ago, me and my ex-husband went to see a movie with an older colleague of his. Before the movie we had dinner at like a chain restaurant steakhouse type place. Staff on the floor was all 20-ish. I never met this man before, but in the first few minutes of sitting down and looking at the menu, he very confidently told us how he came there a lot and flirted with the female staff because they love the attention. The best part? His daughter worked there. All I could think was how I would literally cringe myself through the floor if I was 20 and my 50-year dad came into my place of work and purred on my co-workers because he didn't understand that they only put up with him cause they are paid to do so. My papa would come into the restaurants that I worked in. I usually was his server, but once someone else got his table, my co-workers would fight to take him. My papa was a funny dude that left enormous tips and joked with everyone around him. That was cool with it. He was one of those tall skinny guys that just looks like a guy you could talk to. I remember I had told him about one of my co-workers having a rough time of it. He came in, specifically requested her, and then left her $100 bill as a tip. When I got home, he asked if she had gotten the tip. Of course she had, and then broken down hugging me, telling me that my grandfather was the best person she'd ever met. I hate that our boss is a chick. Bitches make the worst bosses. Lunch break of his first day on the job. Yeah, I met a guy my dad knew that took early retirement rather than have a woman for a boss. He'll be living on a much smaller pension all because he couldn't work another few years under a woman. Meet your teacher day before my kiddo started kindergarten and this other parent literally bragged that her kid was completely illiterate, couldn't stand being read to, and she hated reading too. As a teacher, I can tell you who my least favorite parents are every year on day one. It's not the conservative parents or liberal parents. It's not the Christians or the pagans. It's the parents who tell me they don't read, hate to read. One of the go-to questions I ask during the get to know you time is if they read anything interesting over the summer. I get parents who tell me about fun beach reads or news articles. Some have read frou hippie mindfulness parenting books or spiritual self-help books. All those parents are just fine. The ones who say, I don't like to read, are always the hardest parents to work with. Their kids don't do homework. They look down on the academic concepts I'm trying to teach. They roll their eyes at parent meetings when I talk about the importance of experiential education or involved learning. The crossover between kids who don't take school seriously and kids with a parent that tells me they don't read or hate reading is nearly an identical group of kids. Shockingly, the kids who grow up in homes that hate literacy are difficult students to teach. He learned I'm a physicist and immediately started talking about infinite energy. Add multiple conspiracy theories about how academia is censoring the real science, and you have my former friend. You see, Tesla figured out infinite energy and they had to cover it up. Asked a guy what he does at a business networking event. Well, I'm a chiropractor but looking to get out. How come? All these, me too, accusations. In another state I had 3 of them. Good thing none of them went to the bar. Edit. He probably said board instead of bar. As soon as he started complaining about me too accusations, I pretty much tuned him out. Chiropractors are modern day snake oil salesmen. Not much evidence to back up their profession as a permanent and meaningful cure. Just a feel-good treatment. I know a guy that realized that it was bullshit halfway through chiropractor school. He had taken out a huge loan for it though, and felt he had to see it through. I guess he got over it, cause he's doing pretty well with it now. Haha. The new neighbor, who after introducing himself pointed to his chest and says, "Instant a-hole, just had beer." That's what the family says. Now we're not gonna be neighbor pals. F you Ive. You were an a-hole even without beer. When people claim to be an a-hole, believe them. We had just moved into a new house. An older gentleman, he was 65 and I was 35 at the time, came across the street towards me and stuck out his hand. I shook it and he said, "We love new neighbors, as long as they're white." Started at a new job, went for a team dinner, and the very first thing he did was talk about how bad the dating scene was in the city and how ugly all the women are. Dating scene was absolutely fine BTW. I pull out of the conversation, and then he just continues to ramble on about how smart he is versus everyone else. Safe to say I've been avoiding him since. Was a customer at work. Naturally I wouldn't be friends, but even in a setting where we could become friends it wasn't happening. I came up to her to see if she had any questions about our critters. I work in a pet shop, and the very first thing she asked was if parakeets could talk, because she wanted to teach them racial slurs. Biggest nope of my life. Oh, you're a Scorpio? I can definitely tell because girl only knew me for 5 minutes when she said that. It was a group project. I was forced to get along with her for the better part of a semester. This was in an astronomy class. They didn't know what World War II was, who Hitler was, or why ISIS were bad. She thought it was a slur for white person because she kept seeing it on the news and online. I have to assume she was homeschooled by imbeciles, because about the only things we covered repeatedly in history class were the Revolutionary War, the Civil War, World War I and World War II. Public school. Met her in university. She was in engineering. Yes, this guy hopped into our Discord group a few months back. He was a friend of a friend, but he didn't think to just add him to our server, not our group chat. We all hop into a call, and first thing he does is make some remarks that are very politically sensitive, send some graphic photos, and made some inappropriate remarks. Didn't expect to meet someone and have him offend 6 people in the span of 10 minutes. I knew I wasn't gonna like her based off her actions on her first day at work. We work with dogs at a daycare and boarding place. In the morning, during feedings, one of the first things she tried to do was get meds from the med cabinet. I tell her no, that's front desk, they handle medication. She just kinda nods. In my head, I'm like, not sure why you are trying to pass out meds without anyone explaining anything to you, but okay, let's move on. Few days go by, then one day, she asks if she's supposed to clean the water bowls we have in the dog's suites overnight. She was already told how to clean suites, which involve cleaning the bowls every morning. I just say yes. She also asked me if she should clean the park water bowl after a dog peed in it. I again say yes. She still works here, but no one likes her, since she likes to pretend she knows what she's doing, then asks questions that can be answered by having basic common sense and problem solving skills. New girl at my job. I asked her how her training videos were going, and she rambled for about 30 seconds about how her old professors bred horses. She ended up being my least favorite coworker. Bro, horse girls are the craziest. I made fun of my friend for marrying a horse girl. Light banter, not actually shaming. And he was a normal dude. Until BAM 2016. He's a full-on red hat, grab her by the fussy type of dude. His wife is right alongside him the whole time. Had just started a job, and within a minute of meeting one of my new colleagues, he waxes lyrical about how weak it is that one of our other colleagues uses an inhaler, oblivious to the fact I myself use an inhaler, though my asthma is mild and well managed. Ironically, the shit-talking colleague in question had no discernible chin and looked very out of shape himself. I started my PhD a few months ago, and one of a common starter conversation with postgraduates you just meet is, what is your thesis about? Well, I get asked the question first, and after describing my dissertation theme, the other guy goes, oh I see. Well, mine is actually important, with a very condescending tone. Well pal, F you too I guess. All-time favorite was this girl they had just hired, who would answer any question by responding that she had a fiancé, like, hi my name is Bill, where are you from? I have a fiancé. Like any of us were going to bang her in the walk-in cooler, if she didn't. I was the only woman at my last job, and I was second in seniority on our little crew. I did almost all of the training of the new people. All the younger guys loved me because I was like mom to the crew. Always had snacks and would always listen when they were having a problem or whatever. My biggest problems were usually with guys in their mid-30s. In the morning meeting, the bosses told everyone their job assignments. As we were walking out of the shop, he said, yeah, like I'm going to listen to some snot-nosed 24-year-old chick, to one of the older guys, and the older guy turned and looked at him and said, I suggest you say that to her face. And if I were you, I wouldn't piss her off. We will always like her, more than we will ever like you. And he was an absolute D to work with, and never listened to anybody except for the managers. Lasted about 3 weeks. Still dislike that guy. My favorite was when my husband and I were working together for a bit. He worked there before and we needed help. so he came in on days off to lend a hand, and the one guy I was having issues with at the time said I was a huge bitch and he didn't understand why they didn't just fire me, aside from my tits. Thinking this new guy would be his friend, husband listened to him all day and didn't say a word. At the end of the day, when the entire crew was filling out time cards, he looks at the guy and says, "Thank you for telling me all day how much of a bitch my wife is, but you're right, she does have great tits." 2004. First day in my college dorms, and the very first words my new roommate says to me, after "Hi, I'm," name, were, "You're a Republican, right?" I didn't want to cause problems within the first minute of meeting, and I didn't really follow politics too closely at the time, so I just said, "Sure," to keep the peace. Then he slapped a "Proud Republican" sticker on the front of our door. It was not a great year. I was talking to a girl in college and she made some remark about, "Yeah, like when you test your boyfriend to make sure he loves you," and I remember thinking, "You seemed so normal." When I was an intern in like 2017, I used to carpool in a packed car of other interns, mixed gender group. First day this girl asks the whole car, but she's only directing it to the guys, "Do you think Kendall or Kylie is hotter?" Absolute silence for several minutes. Edit. To answer some questions, no, celebrity gossip isn't a moral failing, but it was a super awkward question, because when stuff crosses over into a conversation of physical attractiveness with a bunch of new co-workers, it's uncomfortable. Also in my case, small talk with this girl was always awkward, and we never got along in the 6-month internship. She also ended up being really rude and catty sometimes. Went to the penthouse party of a guy my friend used to hook up with. This dude gave me Patrick Bateman vibes, from his house decor to the way he talked. Total creep. The only time he spoke directly to me the entire party, he was making fun of homeless people. I did not like him. My new neighbor moved in and avoided contact for the first week or so, before walking over to us, while my wife and I were doing some yard work. He says, "I've got my lady hollering at me to come to the hospital. She's having our kid." "Oh, congrats," I said. "I hope it's not mine," he says. Girl, I have 2 siblings. How many siblings do you have? Me, I have 10 siblings, but I only associate with my twin now. Girl, disgusted. Geez, your mom should close her legs. I bet you don't even share a father with all of them. Me, you're a B, walks away. I didn't want to respond to the actual statement because out of those 10 the only full-blooded relative I had was my twin. 6 were half. 3 were step and 1 adopted. I think that whole conversation lasted less than 30 seconds. It was supposed to be a simple icebreaker, and that single question told me everything about her personality and who she was. A B. She was complaining the 15-year-old kid who just fled from the war in Ukraine wasn't working hard enough at his dishwashing job. The kid doesn't want to be alone in a dishwashing kitchen all day, not able to speak to anyone. He should be in school at home with all his friends. Of course he's not excited about the stupid dishes. The lack of compassion was astounding. And she was indeed a wretched person. So my initial impression was totally correct. No one wants to work anymore. I've been here 15 years and I've never called in sick. I had a fever and I came in and powered through it. I said I was sorry that he couldn't afford to miss a shift and he got all offended. It was genuinely a point of pride for him to work while sick. Absolutely disgusting. I met this guy at a bar and I was moderately interested in him, but when we started texting throughout the following week, I was really into him to the point where I sent him a few pics of my chest, and then one day he went on some tangent about how the vaccines are bad for you, etc, etc. I'm an RN and I was so embarrassed that I sent him my jugs without properly moons. Sure, he wasn't a lunatic. Edit. I meant making, not moons SMH. Lol. I have a literal opposite story to this prompt. I had some friends at work, ate lunch with them a lot, hung out after work sometimes. One of them was much more outgoing and willing to talk to other folks at the company than I was, despite how many more years I had been there. She invited some random guy to our lunch one day, and I, who is always hesitant with change, was a bit reluctant. But whatever, it's not like I can control who she invites. The guy showed up and a bit of awkward conversation ensues. Typical of a new person trying to test the waters in an established group. But he really went for it and talked about how the perfect job for him would be to shave his feet and sell pictures on Snapchat or OnlyFans and make loads of money. Because who would know if they only saw their feet? I guess it was funny, looking back on it, but this was the first time I ever met the guy, and it was while we were at work, so it was a bit of a shock, and I definitely came out of that first meeting with a negative opinion of the dude. Cut to a few months later, and every time we've happened to hang out since then, and yeah, the guy is a good dude, super chill, goes with the flow, doesn't take much personally, and you know, just a good dude in general. If we ever end up at the same party, I find myself hanging out with the guy because he's a cool dude, willing to put himself out there, as I should have judged from that first conversation. It was just a weird first impression. But when hasn't that happened to you when you tried to fit in with a random group of people? Made me more patient and more open with meeting new folks and giving them multiple chances to make an impression on me.